Hello, it's Shelby from Turn Sounds. Don't get sunscreen in your eyes.
Hey, I'm Abby, a clinical nutritionist.
And I'm Shelby, a clinical exercise physiologist, and this is the Move Your Mind podcast.
We are sick and tired of people being led astray by false information about diet and exercise.
So join us as we discuss common misconceptions about food and fitness with the latest scientific research.
Let's get into it.
Hello.
Hi.
And hello to Lee.
Hello.
We have another guest with us today, which I'm so pumped for. I cannot wait. I think I've been teasing this for a while, that we're going to talk about pain and pain mechanisms and chronic pain. And I'm just so excited. So hello, Lee. Welcome.
Hello, Shelby. Hello, Abby. How you going?
Hello.
So,
Very excited.
Who are you, Lee? Why should we listen to what you have to say?
Oh, geez. No, don't listen to anything I have to say. My name's Lee. I'm a physiotherapist by trade, and I'm also a PhD student.
Yes.
So I'm still a student, but I'm diving
times.
into all the kind of latest research in pain, so hopefully I can share some of that stuff with you
Cool.
We'd
today.
love to hear it. Absolutely. Yeah. So Lee and I met in university because I started a physio degree. So we were in the first couple of years of physio together.
Yep.
And then I left for exercise and sports science. See you
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, maybe a good move, actually.
Yeah. I'm
Ooh.
quite happy with it. Anyway, so that's how I know Lee. We go way
Yeah.
back, and then I've just kind of kept in touch because I know how into pain science you are. And it's obviously a little baby of mine as well. I love it.
Mm.
This won't be. I'm pregnant.
Oh,
I wanted to tell you that because,
Oh,
hey,
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. That
Very
won't be it.
exciting.
I just
Okay.
wanted to let you know that I'm pregnant
Oh.
and it's what's going on
Awesome.
with me. Anyway, yeah.
when did that sort of happen?
I'm 15 weeks pregnant tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So at the beginning of the year.
Awesome.
Yeah, when you said little baby, I was like, where are we
I know,
going
that's
with
what
this?
I didn't
Yeah.
mean to, and I can cut this out, but I want you to know.
I should leave that in there for sure.
Anyway, so besides my actual baby that I'm making.
This is your second baby?
Absolutely. Well, it was the first one, really.
Oh, right,
I was
okay.
interested in
Ooh.
pain before I...
Okay.
But a topic I'm crazy passionate about, and I know Abby is as well from a nutrition standpoint, dealing
Yeah.
with pain
Yeah.
from that
Yeah.
kind of point of view.
Cool.
So, very happy to have you on to help explain what's going on when we feel pain, and I can't remember where I was going with that, but I'm very excited.
I can just see
Alright.
Shelby's face for people that are listening and not watching. Shelby's like grinning from ear to
I'm
ear.
about to float off this chair. I'm so excited.
I love it.
You don't often come across people who have like a real interest in pain.
Yeah.
You know, when you say, "Oh, I'm really interested in pain,"
Yeah.
They're
look
like,
at
"Yeah,
funny,
are you? Yeah,
seriously,
why?"
are you some kind of masochist?
Absolutely.
No, like intellectually, I'm
look at it.
interested in the topic.
Absolutely.
You know?
Actually, that's
Yeah.
a good distinguishment to make.
Yeah, not creating
Not
pain
inflicting
and hurting
pain.
people, but understanding why people
Absolutely.
might hurt.
Absolutely.
quite the opposite,
Yeah.
preventing pain.
Absolutely.
Not
or managing
creating
yeah,
pain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
So very, very cool topic that I think anyone can benefit from knowing more about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's very common, people just living with pain, isn't it? Like every second person, I feel pain in my back, my neck, this hurts all the time, like this is just something that I live with. But I guess what you do is kind of understanding why that happens from a holistic or widespread perspective,
Yep.
and then kind of honing in to how we can manage it so it doesn't have to be as severe.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, so
Very
I guess
much.
one in three people have some kind of a persistent pain, persistent low back pain being the most
Yeah.
common,
Yeah.
followed fairly closely by shoulder pain and neck pain.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's not like this is something that's kind of happening in the background. Lots of people are experiencing persistent pain. It's
Okay, you come a little bit
big-
close to the mic. Yep, go
Oh,
on. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lots of people are experiencing persistent pain.
Yeah, isn't low back pain one of like the leading causes of disability in Australia or something?
In the world.
In the world?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
I didn't want to
yeah.
be so bold just to say the world. I knew it was, yeah.
Yeah, so above things like diabetes and cancer and,
Oh,
and
wow.
heart disease.
Yeah.
Chronic low back pain.
And the cost of it on society and on the individual and things like that are massive.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 You think about sort of days lost at work,
Yeah.
these sorts of things, it really adds up over time.
Yeah.
So chronic low back pain and chronic pain in general is a big issue that we face
Yes.
as a human society.
So I kind of brushed over it before. Do you want to talk about your PhD project and what that involves?
Yeah, sure. So I'm doing my PhD at Notre Dame. and that's
Ooh.
in Fremantle for
Yes.
anyone who's
Fremantle, Australia, yes.
Perth?
Yeah.
I don't know how wide-reaching
We've
the
got a few
podcast
around,
is.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Few in Switzerland,
Yes.
don't we?
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. For those of you over in Switzerland, it's on the west coast of Australia. Anyway, so yeah, it's. I'm looking at persistent low back pain, and specifically, so if you have persistent low back pain, along your clinical journey, you're going to pick up bits and pieces of information about what the cause of your back pain is and what the contributors are, and I'm looking at whether or not that information can influence your pain experience in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh my God, I love this already. Continue.
so the kinds of information that people with chronic low back pain tend to have is fairly catastrophic. A lot of people think it's related to some sort of structural issue or some sort of pathological process that's occurring in their back. They
So
might
some kind of disease or injury.
disease or
yep.
injury
Yep.
or malalignment or
Yeah.
tend to take a very biomedical approach to their pain, and this can be helpful in some cases, but we know in the vast majority of back pain it's probably not the right approach to be taking. And it's quite a concern when you talk to these guys. They tend to have a fairly fixed kind of mindset as to what the cause of their pain is and what should be done, but have exhausted a lot of the biomedical options available to them and have had little success. And so it's quite a challenge from a therapist's perspective to kind of make sense of what they've been doing so far and perhaps try and lead them down an alternative approach to managing their problem that's a little bit less focused on fixing the broken structure.
Which is something they've been focused on for potentially years, decades, is dealing with this fix of whatever's going on. And then you get to open up this whole other realm of like possibility of what can be going on and factors you can address to manage the pain.
Yeah, even things like you hear people say, I've got a slip disc. Like even that term in itself, it's very like aggressive, and you can imagine what someone would picture in their brain if they've got a slip disc.
Yeah.
Like it's just out of place, and then you're like, oh my gosh, that's my spine.
Yeah,
like
or
that's
a disc
what's going on.
And,
yeah.
So you're on the right track as far as and you see a scan and it will say degeneration and just all this harmful language. So that's kind of what you're dealing with is like the language these people are being told about their situation and the harmful effects that can have on them.
Yeah. I mean, for example, I saw a guy the other day, and he's had back pain for 30 years.
Yeah.
And his initial event was just bending over to touch his toes, and he felt a spasm in his back, and it never kind of improved from there.
Yeah.
After his event, he got scans, and it showed some structural pathology, but we know based on a lot of the research now that some of these structural pathologies are found in people who don't have pain as well. So it's hard to say that that's the reason why he had his initial pain event. But since his diagnosis, he's kind of over the years continued to go downhill. And I spoke to him about, what he thinks the cause of his pain is now. And he goes, well, I've got arthritis all through my spine and it's eating out the tissues. So it's like eating my spine. And I asked him what he's kind of doing for it. And he said, look, I've gotten to that point where I've given up. And he said, have you seen those nature documentaries with, David Attenborough, where there's, a deer and it's running away from a lion and then it gets caught by the lion and it struggles and then eventually just kind of gives up.
Yeah.
So he likened his experience to that deer just kind of giving up. And, you can understand he's had 30 years of back pain. He's seen a whole number of different therapists and have had little success. You can understand at 30 years in, he'd feel that way.
Yeah, there is no way that's a fun experience to go through at all. So absolutely you could empathise with those feelings of like, I'm done. This is it. But that language of my spine is being eaten. Absolutely. That's like visceral, like that's really deep and that has bigger effects on you than I think many people would be willing to admit. I guess. And that can tell a whole lot about that client, right? Like the language he uses is kind of directing you a lot as far as how you would then respond.
Yeah, sure.
Next.
It gives us an understanding of the person's belief structure around what's happening, and it's a fairly catastrophic belief structure that he has, and it also paints this picture of irreversibility. And if if anything, it actually paints this picture of things just continuing to get worse over time. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
yeah. If there's something eating your spine, it's going to continue to eat your spine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or if the lion's got you, lion's not going to get disinterested and walk away. He's going to keep going.
That's right.
Yeah.
And how can you work within someone's narrative like that to kind of paint a more positive view of the future? It's really quite hard to work within that sort of language and that understanding to make him feel like there's a future without back pain, or with less back pain, better managed. And, anyway.
So you brought up belief systems before, and you also said that he's got a diagnosis of arthritis. So like, not knowing, if I didn't know anything about that, I'd go, well, yeah, he's got arthritis, it's wear and tear, it's degenerative. What does a person's belief systems have anything to do with something that's happening in the tissues? So why does that even matter?
Yeah, so that's a really big question.
Yes.
Sorry.
But no, it's a good question to ask. And there's lots of different ways that we can approach that question. The PhD that I'm studying is looking at back pain through this model called predictive processing. Have you heard that term
Yes,
before?
yeah. I wouldn't be able to
I'm
tell
not
you too much,
familiar
but
with
I've
it.
definitely heard it before. Yeah.
Right, okay. So predictive processing, the basic idea is that we have this brain, right, and this brain is encased within a dark skull where it can't see, hear, or touch or feel anything, right? It needs to make sense of incoming sensory information, right? But it hasn't got direct access to that information. It's got sort of just basically neuronal signals coming in.
Yeah.
And so in order to make sense of what that information is, it needs to make inferences, right? And so it uses its prior experiences, things that it's kind of learnt up until that point, to make sense of the incoming sensory information.
Yep.
Right? And to some degree, our beliefs and expectations inform what we predict, right? So on a moment-to-moment basis, we're making active predictions about what sensory information is going to be coming in.
Yes.
Right? For example, we do it with language all of the time. So as I'm talking, you're guessing the next word that I'm about to say, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
Based on our previous conversations with people and what tends to happen as a
I get
pattern of
told off for
language.
doing that all the time, like especially with my parents. They start talking and then I'm like, yeah. And they're like, you just interrupted me, and I'm like, I know what you're going to say. Like, how do you know? I'm like, I just know.
Exactly, right? And that's because you've got what we call an internal model. So in your brain, you kind of over time construct these internal models of what's happening in the world, as well as what's happening in your body. And we make predictions from those internal models about what we're going to experience next. So of all the conversations that you've had with your parents over time, you've
telling you
constructed
100 times to unpack the dishwasher.
The
or
same
whatever.
thing over and over.
Yeah, that's right. To the point where they can go, hey, Abby, and you're like, yes, I'll unpack the dishwasher, right? Like, you know what's coming next, okay?
Yes.
But what if they said, hey, Abby, let's go out for ice cream? Like, that would be completely unexpected.
Yeah.
Right, potentially, I don't know if your parents are into that sort of thing.
No,
Right.
I mean, yeah, I shouldn't cut them off then. Maybe sometimes they're about to say that and I'd cut them off.
Yeah, you just out at an ice cream.
They went,
opportunity.
all right, no worries, she interrupted, no worries.
That's so funny.
So that's sort of like an unexpected input. And
Yeah.
when we have something unexpected, it tends to hit consciousness better, right? Because if you're kind of, a good example would be you're driving down a familiar road, right? You don't need to concentrate while you're driving down that familiar road, right? You've got a strong enough internal model that you can use to predict the flow of sensory information as you're driving down that road, right? So you'll probably tune out. You might get to the end of that road and realise that, you didn't even pay attention for that whole strip. You might get to your destination, you're like, oh, all right, well, I'm here.
Exactly. How did I get here? I don't remember what happened just now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But if you were driving down that road and there was like a zebra on the side of the road, right, all of a sudden you're consciously aware of what's happening there.
Yeah.
And that's because the predictions that you're making aren't correct for a period of time there. So you're hit with this massive prediction error. And in order to process that prediction error, you kind of become conscious of that zebra, right?
Yeah.
And perhaps, you know, that let's say that zebra just for some reason stays there for a few months and you continue to drive down that road, you might then get back to the point where you no longer notice
You're
the
driving
zebra.
and you know there's a zebra 400
Yeah,
metres
so-
down the road. or
right,
whatever,
yeah, that's
and
just
it's
Barry
fine.
the zebra, you know, and you just keep going.
Good
But-
morning, Barry, and continue on your way. Yep.
So you just you have this really strong internal model about what you're likely to experience,
Yep.
right? And we know that we experience to some degree our predictions. And if you've been running the same model for a really long time, so we're thinking about pain now. If you,
Yeah.
in my research, we've called it the pain expectant internal model. So if you've had pain for a really, really long time, it's like you've been driving down that road for years and years and years and years and years.
Yep.
Right? And it's actually quite hard to see your body part in a different way if you've been predicting that and strengthening those circuits over time.
Yep.
So to some degree, you know, we can say, look, these people who have persistent pain, yeah, they might have some structural things going on, but there's also evidence of there being changes in the way that their brain is making sense of sensory information coming from their back
Yep.
or from their hip or knee or shoulder or wherever. And so bringing it back to the biomedical model seems to just focus specifically on the tissue,
Yep.
right? But not on the way that the person is processing information coming from the tissue.
Yep.
And so there's a move toward, happened back in the 80s with George Engel, but there's a move towards what we call the biopsychosocial model. And the biopsychosocial model just takes into account someone's psychology and their social environment in their experience of pain.
Yeah.
So,
Which was massive when it came out, right?
yeah, which is huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And now we're all like, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like well, I don't know, the biomedical model is still very prominent in the treatment of pain or the care of people with pain, and perhaps that's not ideal.
It's taken a while for this new model to kind of infiltrate down into kind of mainstream education and therapy, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's taught in physiotherapy schools all over the world, right? But you know, even then, there's issues with the biopsychosocial model.
Yes.
So. I guess it's there's this tendency for clinicians who work within the biopsychosocial model to divide people into, this is biological pain, or this is psychosocial pain. So you might have someone with chronic pain and, you know, they kind of put in the psychosocial bin, you know. They might say something like, I've had pain for 30 years and I lost my job and, the doctor said that I've got a degenerating spine and, it's affected my relationship with my kids and all this stuff. And the biopsychosocial clinician, if they're not being a true biopsychosocial clinician, will say, that's just a psychosocial
They'll
pain.
write down yellow flags and go, this is what it is.
Yeah. Whereas, someone might come in with a sprained ankle after playing netball on the weekend and they'll see some tissue swelling and they'll say, this is a biological pain, let's just deal with this. Let's put some ice on it, maybe.
We have covered that.
We
up.
have covered it.
Yeah, so maybe not.
Yeah.
Just gradually
Maybe
get
not.
it moving again, maybe elevate and compress.
It sounds good.
Peace
Peace
and
and love.
love.
Absolutely.
Peace and love.
So there's still this like separation of the model into separate entities, and it's not being appreciated as its entirety and the influence of all three on your experience.
Yeah, for sure.
So sad.
Yeah, I mean, you could think about this person with the sprained ankle from netball, and you ask them, how are you feeling about this? I'm really distressed. My netball competition is this weekend. I don't think I'll be able to play. This is the third time I've done this. I think this ankle is stuffed. It'll never get better again.
Yeah.
This actually happened to a client of mine 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And she had this massive response. It blew up, it bruised everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the 5th time this has happened. She was in this really good spot, like physically beforehand. She was loving her training. She was doing really well.
Yeah.
Now this has happened. And it was really good because she led herself there. She was like, I've lost my confidence. And then she was saying every time I step on it, it hurts and it feels so unstable and blah, blah, blah. I was like, you've already told me that it's got more to do than your ankle, right? Like you've lost this confidence you have in this body part of yours.
Yeah.
Let's explore that and how we can build that back up.
Yeah.
And then like it was like 10 days later and she was doing like hops and stuff.
Yeah, right.
Because there wasn't anything there.
Wasn't a
Just
serious injury?
No,
or anything
absolutely.
like that?
Yeah, no, the swelling response was just massive.
Okay.
And then we did appropriate things to deal with that, and we didn't load her early, or like we did, but we were appropriate with our loading early, and I addressed these factors as far as like, look, you can walk on it, we've shown nothing's broken, blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just like
That's what you did.
handle it.
That's what you did for me with my ankle or my
Yes.
foot when I broke my foot.
Yes.
How long ago was that? 6 months ago,
Yeah,
probably now. And once I got the clear to get it moving a little bit more, you were giving me calf raises and things like that. So I was going home and practicing it. Once again, my parents love them, but I seem to talk badly about them.
They're really nice
Ice cream
people.
that time, so.
How dare they? Just told me to unload the dishwasher. I was doing calf raises and they were like, are you sure you're meant to be doing this?
Yeah.
Like your ankle or your foot was just broken. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, no, Mum, like I need to do this because it's my brain's telling my body part that I'm okay. And like I'm not in danger and it's part of getting better.
Yeah.
So that's something you taught me.
Yeah,
Like the psychological part of it
absolutely.
to stop the kind of protective mechanisms which can make it worse.
Yeah, and once my client kind of realised that this event didn't have to derail the next year of her life, she was like, all right, and then we just actually dealt with what happened and like, loaded it appropriately, and then like dealt with the psychological aspects of it where she was feeling stressed and anxious and whatever, and we were able to like, and then it was fine. And then I was
So
like,
cool.
you have to remember this experience. Like you have to remember that this happened right now,
Yeah.
and not just like forget about it. And the next time something happens, remember all the other times.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So to make it a meaningful experience for her.
Yeah. And then hopefully she can apply that to injuries that she has in the future. Right?
Correct.
Because
Correct.
we're all going to hurt ourselves at
Absolutely.
some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's fortunate that it was an ankle. We tend to separate body parts.
There are like good parts to injure and there are bad parts to
That's
injure.
so true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once you hurt your back, there's no going back, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a pretty common narrative.
Yeah.
And we know that it's just not true. Like the tissues in the back are the same as the tissues in your ankle and in your shoulder.
Exactly,
And there's obviously mechanical differences between the two, but the tissue healing rates are the same.
Yeah, you're looking at bone and ligament and muscle just the same as the other areas. And
Even things like serious disc herniations can resorb.
Yeah.
And so I think that, there's definitely this narrative. I mean, you watch any sort of manual handling video and it's, be careful the way that you lift or else if you lift in the wrong way, you're gonna herniate your disc and you're never going to be able to work again, and it's quite
and what's that
catastrophic.
word? Like herniate? Like, that sounds terrible. I don't want to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's that's actually near your spinal cord. You might injure your spinal cord.
My goodness, don't do
So
that.
it's pretty catastrophic
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Disregarding how resilient and strong and stable it is as a structure in itself as well, right?
Yeah, the spine is pretty robust.
It has
We
to be.
can
It's got your
injure it.
spinal cord in there.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's so
exactly
true.
right. And you look at these anatomical models of the spine, and they're not coated in the layers of connective tissue that actually surround the spine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It is this really like if you actually look at like a cadaveric specimen of a spine, you're cutting through layers upon layers upon layers of tissue in order to get to those structures at the bottom.
Where we see
Right.
just the bones stacked up on top of each other.
Yeah.
In like the
Thinking
model
about
or
the little
whatever.
thing in science class, it's just like the head wiggles and if you hit it too hard, the pelvis falls off.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that
right.
type of thing,
And the disc bulges out one way. It's all red and inflamed, and there's nothing around it to stop it
Yes.
going anywhere. It's just going to slip right out the side and go
Yeah.
across the room. And
How unstable is that?
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And those models are in physio practices everywhere.
Oh, they're all over the place. you
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
and-
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you go into someone who would treat your back, and they have one of those sitting on the shelf, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
My scoliosis surgeon that I have been seeing over the years has that in his office.
Yeah.
And I remember when my most recent appointment with my x-ray result, which was good, he was like, oh, really good job. You seem to maintain it well. But then he was like, okay, let me just show you what your spine looks like, and then curved it out a little bit. He was like, you see how these vertebrae touch? And he was like showing me how they were touching and like friction. He was like, look at this friction. Like, you're probably going to get arthritis. That's literally what he said to me.
Oh, right. Okay.
So things like that are so damaging. So luckily, I can imagine people that would go through. I mean, I had my good few days of being really upset about it. And I was like, okay, let's think about the actual possibility of this happening. And like, so then I shifted my thinking to not get stuck in that bubble.
Yeah.
And that's helped me immensely.
Yeah.
And like, since then, maybe rebelling against that thought has actually allowed me to get better.
Yes, I know we've done a lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've been able to challenge a lot of those thoughts and previous movement patterns for yourself, because we've kind of been working on this.
Yeah,
it's
right.
all right. Like,
Okay.
you can tolerate it. Your muscles are there.
Yeah.
Everything's there.
And the sense of accomplishment as well that comes from like changing your thought patterns and then getting results as well. That's fed into my pain like
absolutely.
so much.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so interesting.
It's
So
really
that's where I
interesting.
go when you start like, oh, my back hurts. I'm like, yeah, well, why? Because I know you've been told across the years all these crazy things that are very biomedical in
definitely.
nature, are very like your spine is curved and your spine shouldn't be curved, so that's got to mean something bad has got to happen. And so kind of trying to fight that narrative.
Change the
that
narrative.
It's not a direct cause to arthritis or something necessarily. But even if it is, does that have to mean pain? Does that have to mean disability as well?
That's
Like,
another conversation.
absolutely.
Right?
So like even if whatever you have structural things that mean things are loaded unevenly, whatever does that even mean? Then what does that mean? You have to be in pain anyway?
Not
Probably
necessarily.
not.
no.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's people walking around with quite severe osteoarthritis, and I've seen people in the clinic. It's not an uncommon finding for someone to go, yeah, my hands are riddled with us.
Maybe not.
Never seen that.
Maybe we'll go
cut
over
that one
that. My hands are riddled with arse.
No, can we keep it in?
Hey, welcome to the podcast, Lee.
Today we're talking about hands that are riddled with
I
us.
said not to listen to me, so it's good evidence for that.
What are their hands riddled with?
Arthritis.
Great, yeah.
And look, they'll have changes in the stiffness of the joint, changes in the range of motion of the joints of the hand. The hands might not be able to grasp and extend as well as they used to, but no pain. As far as I understand, your likelihood of having pain is higher if you do have osteoarthritic changes, but it's not a definite. Right? And this just points to the relationship between tissue damage and inflammation and actual pain experience. There's not a perfect one-to-one relationship between those two things.
Absolutely not. You can have that sensory input and not feel pain, and you can have pain without that sensory input as well. They're not directly related to each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the kind of common term that's thrown around is that pain does not always equal tissue damage, right?
Completely true. And I think just understanding that in itself can be monumental for some people, because they're looking for that tissue damage. Well, why am I getting pain? There must be something wrong in the tissues because I'm getting pain.
Yes.
If we can just like separate that thought at its beginning, then you can change the whole next chapter of what they think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess might be worth leading on to what we think pain currently is.
Please.
Yes.
From there. So
Absolutely.
if pain does not necessarily equal tissue damage, then what is pain?
What is it? Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Why? Yeah. Exactly.
This is such a big
Why
question.
can I have
My brain is
arthritis?
exploding.
Why can I have this bulky knuckle and not be able to move my finger properly, but not experience pain?
Yeah, and then on the other end of the spectrum, someone might have very mild arthritis and experience quite debilitating
pain.
Absolutely.
from that.
Absolutely.
And so there's this clear kind of in the literature we would call that a dissociation, right? So you can have one present without the other, which means that there's not a perfect correlation between the two. And we think about like rain and clouds, right? There's a perfect correlation between that because you're not going to have rain without clouds.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, you can have the experience of pain in the absence of tissue damage, and you can have quite significant tissue damage with no pain, right? So there's there is a relationship there, obviously. Like if you got your finger and started to bend it back to the point where you're damaging the tissues in the front of your finger,
Yep.
like you're going to experience,
Absolutely.
highly likely to experience pain in
Yep.
that situation.
Yep.
But, you think about examples where sports players come off the field and, they might have done an ACL, right? And they don't notice that they've done that until they've come off the field and they're sitting down and their knee just balloons,
Yeah.
right? And so they've had significant tissue injury,
Mhm.
but in the, the height of the game, when they're focused on the game and they're, trying to win,
Yeah.
that experience of pain doesn't register.
Yeah.
Right.
There's another crazy story where a guy is like working with his nail gun and something goes wrong and he shoots himself in the foot with the nail. And excruciating pain, and he's screaming all the way to the hospital, and they take his shoe off or they x-ray it, whatever, and the nail's gone between his toes. Like, it's not touched him at all. Yet he was hollering and screaming and in so much pain.
Yeah.
Oh
so-
my god.
Yeah, so like, stories like that just to highlight this disassociation between what's actually happening in the tissues and the experience that you're feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was published in the British Medical Journal.
Yes, yeah.
So it was a case study that
Yes.
was published.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like some bloke
Some-
telling a story.
Yeah, hypothetical, what if this happened? No, it was,
But so it was a legitimate case study.
Absolutely,
And they gave him fentanyl
yeah.
to try and sort of numb his experience of pain, because as they were trying to remove the nail, he was just screaming in agony.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and then they gave him fentanyl, removed the boot, and noticed that there was no injury to his foot, right? And that's, people will go, oh yeah, that was just psychosomatic, or that's just imagined pain, but it's the same pain experience that you would have if you'd actually damaged your tissues,
Absolutely, yeah.
because pain is a protective response that we have, and it's something that our brain does when it has enough sort of credible evidence to suggest that a pain response would be important right now.
Yeah.
And specifically a protective response in relation to the integrity of our body,
Yeah.
right? Or the integrity of our bodily tissues.
Mhm.
So in that case of this guy, he actually stepped on a nail
Okay.
and it went up
Cool.
through the
Yep,
bottom
all
of
right.
his boot.
I so you didn't see it. Interesting.
yeah.
Yep, yep.
And so in that case, he had pretty solid visual evidence that he'd damaged his foot.
Yep.
He had probably a weird sensation in his foot. Like if you imagine what it might feel like to have a nail going between your toes.
Absolutely.
Like it doesn't feel normal.
No.
Right? So
Yeah.
that could be threatening in itself.
Yep.
We know something as simple as your heart rate increasing, in an experience that is stressful, feeds into the brain, right?
Don't worry.
Feeds into the brain.
Yep.
And, our brain has to make sense of, well, why is my heart rate beating fast right now?
Mhm.
I'm probably under threat.
Yeah.
He'd have all these thoughts running through his mind.
Talking about that predictive processing, like you step on a nail and from all the information we've consumed over our life, we're going to
It's
think
gonna
that's
hurt.
probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We
Yeah.
understand that
Yeah.
stepping on nails is bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Even
They're
if
sharp.
haven't-
We keep them away from our skin.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
punctured through
Yeah.
my skin
You've
right
maybe
now.
even done it before, like squished your finger with one as you hammer it in or whatever. You have
Yeah.
these other experiences probably.
That's right. And we
Yeah.
have the capacity to imagine, right?
Absolutely.
So, like, you've probably never
who hasn't
thought
stepped
about-
on a Lego though? Like
Yeah, that's
even
right.
things
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's bloody
Yes.
painful.
Absolutely.
Probably a pain experience that's, a bit out of proportion compared to the actual level of tissue damage that's occurring there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
But-
Why does it hurt so much? Tell me.
I don't know.
Because it's annoying.
It's just bloody frustrating. You're probably just upset that your toddler's left the Lego lying around.
Absolutely. Like if
But,
you've ever stubbed your toe when you're angry, it hurts so much
So
more
much
than if you're just
more.
walking and hit your toe on the wall. Anyway,
But-
yes, this
but
guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
so he's potentially got all these thoughts running through his brain, like how's this going to affect my work? I've really stuffed up my foot here. Maybe I've done some serious damage. And all that feeds into the predictions that the brain is making as to whether or not it should be sort of
Protective?
predicting a protective response.
Yeah.
Or mounting a protective response.
Yes.
And he had enough information there for him to kind of conclude that his body was under threat
Yeah.
and that he should have a pain experience
And should seek help
and should
from
seek
there.
help.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Because pain has certain behavioural responses associated with it
Mhm.
that are generally speaking going to help with that injury.
Mhm.
Right? So we jump up and down, we perhaps swear, we get the attention of others that might be able to help us.
Yeah.
If we've got significant pain in a part of our body, that genuinely needs protection, we need to alert others around us that that part of our body needs protection.
Don't
right?
come near me, don't bump my shoulder right now, it's sore or whatever like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We might need to kind of temporarily guard that part of our body, right? So we have this guarding response to protect the tissues that have been damaged. And if we didn't get that pain experience, right, we just wouldn't behave in that way, right? Because we are driven by the experiences that we have, right? So our brain is trying to protect us, it mounts this pain response, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we've damaged ourselves, right? And even with movements and, input that is potentially damaging, we know that pain or nociception, which is something we should probably cover, we know that someone can have an experience of pain in the absence of tissue damage when the nociceptors are sort of active and firing. We know that nociceptors don't signal necessarily damage in the tissues, but...
What is a nociceptor for us, just before you go on? Quickly cover that for
fair
me.
Enough.
Yeah.
So all throughout our body, we have these specialised sensory receptors, so they provide information to the brain about what's happening in the tissues or in the world around us. And so nociceptors are in pretty much all of our tissues of our body, not our brain actually. So you can get like a chopstick and swirl it around in the brain, and you're not going to say that's painful because there's no nociceptors.
None of that.
Wow, okay.
Just opened a whole other thought process for Abby.
Wow, okay.
So the best example would be like if you guys want to grab onto your finger and literally bend it back until it starts to feel a bit painful, and your audience can do this too if they're not driving.
Why can you do it so fast, Shelby?
Because I'm
You're hyperflexible.
I got some flexi ligaments. It's okay.
Right, so you're probably feeling pain there.
Yeah.
Are you damaging yourself? No. Right? And it would be a really sort of inefficient system if we only experienced pain at the point where we'd actually damaged ourselves.
Correct.
Right? Like if we kept pushing it, and then actually did tissue damage and then got that kind of warning signal, that would be a highly inefficient system.
Well, it's not a warning signal, is it? Because the thing already happened. It's too late.
That's right. That's right. So our pain threshold is often quite significantly lower than our damage threshold. Right?
It does kind of still ache though, my finger.
Yeah. Same here.
It's in your head, Shelby. Previous experiences.
Different
Have you done that before?
Anyway.
So it's always our brain trying to make sense of sensory information coming in, using information from the past and also information from our other senses as well.
And like that, we have ligaments to avoid excessive movement in our joints. And so if those ligaments are feeling strain and stretch to a certain point, it's going to be send that information up to the brain going, mate, like I don't usually stretch this far. What's going on here? And then you compile that information with everything else your brain knows about jarring your finger. Maybe you caught that ball one time and it bent your finger back and it was sore and swollen for a week. You can kind of collect that information and go, all right, well, let's make this hurt so that we can maybe stop and get out of that situation and then avoid the thing that had happened or might happen, because we can imagine as well.
No, that's a really interesting point. So say we had someone who was a footy player and they chronically jarred their finger. Right. We know that even with a serious jarring, you're going to get tissue healing, right? Perhaps the tissues won't be as strong as they used to be, but they're still pretty strong. What do you reckon that person's experience would be of doing the finger bend back?
So we're thinking like less because they have more range there, or could it be more because
I think more because the association with injury.
Yeah, and if that's their job to be able to catch a ball efficiently, you can't hurt your finger.
Potentially they'd be less sort of, they'd probably have a decreased pain threshold because of the association that they've built between that finger and pain experience, right? They're probably more pain expected. Coming back to
definitely
your internal models, they probably have a stronger pain expected internal model,
right?
Because of the history of having injured that finger, right? And so that's what we think is probably happening with most persistent pain. People in this situation have a rich history of experiencing pain in that part of their body, right? And so to some degree, they'd be predicting and expecting it, and we know based on this understanding of perception, essentially, this predictive processing model of perception, that the predictions that we have form part of our experience.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. Well, if A plus B equals C for like 10 years, why wouldn't it?
Yes.
After that, right? So and that's what we're kind of seeing, like we make these patterns of processing that we can depend upon and rely on, and then whether that's true or not
Yeah.
that is the path that we take in our decision making in that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To call it decision making makes it seem like there's someone consciously
Absolutely.
making
That's
a
why I
decision.
took it back because I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of this stuff happens subconsciously.
Absolutely.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't decide
yeah.
to make my finger hurt just then when I bent it back.
No,
Yeah.
it's a subconscious sort of processing of that information.
Yeah.
A nice way of thinking about it would be, let's say tomorrow you're walking down your neighbourhood street and you witness like a catastrophic car accident, right? And you might consciously know that that street is just as safe as any other street, but as you walk down that street for weeks, months, maybe even years to come, you're going to get a physiological response. You're going to have potentially an increase in your heart rate. You might be more alert. Your pupils might dilate. You might start to feel your skin a little bit more. There's this kind of threat response.
Absolutely.
Right? But you might consciously be able to state, like, this is a safe street for me to walk down. This is just as safe as Burton Street around the corner.
Yeah.
But because your brain has been threatened in that situation before, it's likely to mount a form of protective response.
Yeah, I think that's really important to highlight the physiological responses just as much. Just like before with the nail, you said even an increase in heart rate, our brain is then going to try and figure out, why is my heart rate increased? And so that kind of, subconscious, involuntary responses means it's not just you and your brain going, oh, I'm in pain, whatever. There are reasons for that.
Yeah, no, we want to get away from this understanding of this person's thought themselves into pain.
Absolutely.
Because that's not what's going on.
Yeah, they go, oh, so you're telling me my pain's all in my head. And I'm like, no.
And that's a
you're in very
dangerous
real
thing
pain.
in itself. Pain is pain. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it can come from different places.
Yeah, there's different sort of... so I guess when someone experiences pain, it's always real pain. But the information that the brain is kind of drawing upon to make that inference or make that prediction of pain is different in every situation.
Yeah.
Right? And so we draw upon our past experiences and our memories. We draw upon the thoughts and feelings that we have at the time. We draw upon sensory information coming in from the body.
Yeah.
We draw upon sensory information coming in from the world, so what we can see. And then we kind of make an inference subconsciously about whether or not we should be experiencing pain in that moment, generally because of a brain that's trying to protect us and get us to act in certain ways that are protective. And sometimes it can get it wrong, as we've highlighted with the boot example.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can kind of err on the side of caution in that sense.
Yes.
Why not just let's be protective, let's feel the pain just in case it's something or or this, and then,
and that's a question that's been brewing in my mind, I think, for the last 15 minutes. I've probably gone a bit quiet because I've just been thinking about it so intently. But so, you're saying that pain and tissue damage aren't correlated.
Always,
and
completely,
always. But there obviously is a correlation there, but it's not a perfect one-to-one correlation.
Not causative type thing.
But how do you know? So I'm bending my finger back, and the pain is there as a protective mechanism to stop significant damage. But with that knowledge, I could be like, oh, my finger's not going to be damaged. I'll just keep going because the pain isn't causing any damage. But where do you draw the line? Whereas this pain is damage and this pain is protective. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so how can you make a judgment as to whether or not you're actually damaging yourself or whether or not you're safe?
Yes.
I think sometimes you need a healthcare professional.
Yeah.
Right, sometimes it's just beyond your... you just
mental
need to
capacity.
Well, it's just, a healthcare professional, provided they're up to speed, they can, they understand the way that the body functions and the capacity of the body, and they can run certain tests, etc. But then there's also maybe an element of common sense as well. If you've been doing this thing for a long period of time and you haven't had a lot of difficulty with it, and then maybe one week you're feeling particularly stressed and tired and it's been a crappy day at work, and you do the same thing that you've been doing for years and it's painful and uncomfortable, you're probably not damaging yourself in that situation. You're probably just, experiencing. You've probably got.
It's hard to word sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got probably more sensitized due to other things that are occurring in your life at that point in time.
Your nervous system is heightened. It's on the lookout for things more so than it maybe would have been those 100 other times you did that. movement or activity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We know that things like stress can heighten the activity of nociceptors.
Which
and-
makes sense, like if we're stressed, we're going to be more alert of our surroundings, and therefore your brain in this dark little cavity is going to want more coming from your tissues so that it can figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Because you're stressed. So
Yeah.
something's off.
Something's wrong.
Yeah,
I need
exactly.
to make sense of
Absolutely.
why something's
Yeah.
wrong. That maybe I'm under threat here to my tissues.
Yeah, so let's listen to what the tissues are saying, maybe a bit more intently than we otherwise would have, because we need to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Just being more aware, I guess, like being aware of that pain can be from different aspects, and just assessing yourself in a holistic standpoint to be like, where am I at this time? Where are my thoughts? Is this pain coming from elsewhere maybe, or do I need to look into it further with a health professional? Like with my back pain.
Yeah,
Like if
yeah.
I'm sitting down for long periods and I get really intense pain, I'm like, oh, maybe I should go back to my physio or something. But then I'm like, Abby, you're stressed out of your mind. Like, that's probably a big factor. And then once
If you have been sitting still for a long time, no one likes that. Like
Yes.
or our tissues then go, hello. Like,
and my
give me some
association
movement,
with
please.
sitting for a long
Yeah.
time, I always think in my head, oh, my back's going to get sore. I've been sitting for a long time.
And it doesn't even need to be that conscious. Like, and when you said, like, why can't I make my finger stop hurting when I bend it back? It's because it's not a conscious decision. You can't just override that by going, no, this isn't going to hurt.
Yes,
Because
that's a good point.
of everything else underlying that is way more powerful than our conscious decision to feel pain or not feel pain.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's, important.
Yes, I get that. So pain is there to protect you. Like,
Always,
part of it is that
always.
most of the time it won't let you go past that point.
But then, like, the factor of, like, if you have this conscious association as well, if I do this, it will hurt me, that is going to play into it
Yeah.
as well. Like, that's a factor.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
And I guess what comes first, you might have these sort of subconscious processes occurring in which you have at a subconscious level this brain that's predicting threat or potential damage to the body. You have this experience of pain, and then consciously you make sense of that subconscious process afterwards. There's actually a really interesting study. It's not in the world of pain, but what they did is they got participants and they displayed subliminally, so they didn't consciously perceive it, they displayed them the message to stand up during the test.
Oh, what?
And so it'd just be like, flash, stand up, and they don't see it. And then they stood up, right? Most of them stood up. And then they asked them, why did you stand up? And they go, oh, because I needed to stretch my legs, And so after these subconscious processes occur, we have this tendency to fill it with a conscious narrative.
We have to
As
make
to
sense
why-
of what's going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it proceeded, right? So it came after the effect. It wasn't like... So that I reckon that happens quite a lot. There was another interesting study where they got people to read a passage on the ocean. Right? So, the ocean is big and blue and you go for swims in it and, there's all kinds of sea creatures in the ocean. I don't know, it wasn't actually that, obviously.
That's a great story.
The end. And then they asked the person what their favourite clothes washing brand was. And on average, people said Tide, which is an American company. Right, we don't think we have Tide over here really, but it's an American detergent company.
Yeah.
And when asked why they said Tide, they'd construct a narrative as to why they said Tide. Right, so they'd say, oh, my grandma used to use Tide and all her clothes used to smell really, really nice. Right, so we are consciously making sense of subconscious processes.
Absolutely.
And that's why people's language can impact it so much, because that would form part of the reason why you make the narrative up, right? So if you subconsciously have an association with pain, but then part of your reason would be slip disc, degeneration, like arthritis. So that would fit into your reasoning and make it worse.
That could potentially ramp up the sensitivity of the system, right? So you might have this conscious protective system kind of going in the background and you experience pain. How do you consciously make sense of that? Well, you make sense of it with all the information you've been given about that pain so far.
Yeah.
Right?
Particularly because it's an unpleasant experience as well.
Yes.
Like, when something bad happens to me, I'm going to try and figure out why and how to avoid it in the future. Like, I'm going to try and look like retrospectively at what happened and go, how can this not happen again? So we're going to try and connect the dots, whether we are connecting them properly or not.
Yes.
So you like kind of like human nature to be like, all right, how do I not get myself in that situation again? Let's try and figure out why it happened. And then whether your answer is correct or not is kind of where we can get into sticky situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we're using information to make sense of an experience like pain, which is quite subconscious and quite primal. And the information that people are using is really catastrophic, right? So, I mean, 89% of people with low back pain think that their pain is due to structural pathology, right? And to damage and disrepair in the spine. And a large percentage of these people learnt this information from healthcare professionals. Yeah. Right? And that's, I'm not sort of saying that the healthcare professional did the wrong thing. I think that, there are actually situations where, a healthcare professional say, hey, well, you might have a little bit of, inflammation here, you might have a little bit of damage here, but things will get better over time, and they try and reassure them, but people just kind of go away with inflammation damage. Right? Like, obviously, that's what you take away from it. And so I'm not saying this is on the healthcare professionals, but that's where people are getting this information from. And
exactly. Where else? Exactly.
Yeah, and we know that, over the past sort of 20, 30 years, the biomedical approach to pain has gotten more and more precise, right? We've improved substantially in the way that we treat people within a biomedical model, right? Surgeries are getting more and more precise and specific, and, we're using things like stimulators that we put into the spine, and medication is improving for pain management, but pain is getting much worse.
And even on that, like, I could highlight 3 different dysfunctions in your movement that I could be like, yes, you are moving this way, therefore this is why you're hurting, and you're just adding to the narrative potentially, things like that as well.
So not to pick on medical, right? So
exactly,
within, you ask a lot of people with back pain, for example, why they have pain, and they say, oh, because my back keeps slipping out of alignment, right? And so, I mean, we know that this doesn't happen.
We could go on and on about all the different explanations. Yeah, absolutely.
And I need my chiro or my physio or my osteo to put it back in place.
My client said, I'm usually pretty good at keeping on top of what my emotions and stuff at work, but she said, oh, my chiro just put my hips back in place, and I just went, and she went, what? And I'm like, now I have to have this conversation with her. And I just said, no, she didn't.
No, she didn't.
I know her I have a good relationship with her, which is why I was able to be so cavalier with it. But I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't usually let it spill out like that. But I cannot have you believing that this body part was out and it got put back in.
Was with good intentions.
And so we had. Then I was a bit better at explaining my reaction. And we kind of spoke through that a bit more, but it's still going. And that's chiros, it comes from lots and lots of different people within my own health practice as well. So definitely. But anyway, sorry, I couldn't stay on top of that one the other night. It was my last client of an 8-hour day, and I just
you're like, no, this is it.
Absolutely.
This is done.
Absolutely. Anyway.
I think what's happening there is that people are trying to make sense of, feeling better after a therapy, right? And they're given a narrative, and it's like, well, I mean, they said that this is what they're doing. It felt a certain way to me, and then I felt better afterwards. Yeah,
because that's what she was like.
How can you argue with that?
Exactly. She was like, I felt better. I'm like, well, excellent. I'm so glad you felt better after, but I would question the way it happened. And so we went to talk about the therapeutic benefits of someone touching you and someone saying they're going to help you, and actually that help-seeking behaviour and how helpful that can be, and we kind of went into that as well. But I couldn't have her believe it.
And perhaps even in that situation, that person was quite guarded around that part of their body. We know that if you're expecting and predicting pain and you have an experience that is supposedly therapeutic. Well, it is therapeutic.
It is.
Right?
You can't. Exactly.
But the actual active ingredient in it is, if I hold my hands up and put my hands over the top of each other, when someone cracks your spine, this is what happens in your back. It's literally, it doesn't.
There's not much.
Right, and so it's not putting something back into place. It's it's cavitation. It's potentially giving that person reason to relax there, and also giving that person's brain reason to reinterpret sensory information coming from the back
You've
in a
had
less
pressure,
threatening way.
you've probably heard
Yeah.
something.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Might have an association with that kind of therapy in the past as being, therapeutic for you, and so
It's a whole minefield. I've
It is.
pushed us
It's a
into
mind fart.
Where are you?
I don't know.
Somewhere.
Fart.
Yeah, absolutely don't want
Toilet
to.
humour is just.
A brain fart.
Just trying to be a professional
It's a
podcast.
thing.
Oh, no.
I'm on it, Shelby.
That's
It's
all
never
right.
professional.
We've said things, it's okay. It's nothing new.
But like with that topic, then I'm thinking like acute management of pain, because you see people go to chiropractors every 2 weeks because obviously they're getting that relief psychologically, because as you're explaining,
And physiotherapy and massage and all those manual techniques.
so then the kind of psychology part of it could then come into play for more long-term management, so you don't rely on the kind of chiro physio for your pain.
Well, yeah, I guess that can be the issue, that like they're passive modalities is what you can call them. So then you'd have a reliance on
Yes.
this thing, like, we've kind of talked about before, like
Yeah.
you're dealing with the symptoms, not the cause, potentially.
Yeah.
And then, like Lee is saying, maybe building up this unhelpful narrative around your feelings as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, there's been a few studies, like longitudinal studies, looking at, chiropractic manipulation, physiotherapy for acute low back pain, or just natural history. So tell the person, hey, look, it's normal to hurt your back, just try and keep active. Off you go.
Yeah.
And all three groups improve. There's obviously a percentage of that group that doesn't improve. Okay, and that's we have a chronic pain issue. But even though the chiropractic and physiotherapy groups improve over time, they take longer to improve than just natural history, right? So this person who's going in and receiving regular treatment, they might notice that they're improving, associate that improvement, associate that improvement with the therapy they're receiving, but it might actually be that therapy is slowing
Prolonging.
down their recovery, their natural recovery, because our body has a tremendous ability to recover on its own. And I get worried about the narrative that the person picks up during that time.
Yeah.
Right. So if the person thinks that their pain is because their disc has slipped out and they need therapy to put it back in, what does that tell them about the structural capacity of that part of their back?
Absolutely.
All I did was bend over to
And
touch
it
my toe,
just went
and
right
it just
out.
went out.
And what
What's
happens
to
if
stop
that-
it from doing it
Exactly.
again?
Or what happens if
Yeah.
next time that car is, or that clinician is busy next time? What if I go out of
Yes.
state and I can't get access to that person? Like then,
And then you lose your own trust in your ability to heal as well,
Exactly.
because you need
Yes.
someone else to make it better.
Yeah. Well, this
Yeah.
particular client is about 9 weeks pregnant, and
Okay.
her person was like, yeah, you should come to see me regularly throughout this pregnancy, or like this will get worse. And so that's where I was like and I was like,
No.
you have so long left of this pregnancy where I need you to feel strong and capable and robust, and I cannot have this like chipping away at
Yeah.
especially
Right.
relating to
Yeah.
pelvis and back pain.
Yes.
Like
Yeah,
that's
yes,
what
yes.
sent me over the edge, where I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good that you have that relationship with her and you can actually
Definitely.
Open
have
enough.
the conversation.
Absolutely.
She
Yeah.
trusts you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes,
Yeah,
exactly. And that's the issue. Not that it helps, like if it helps you and if it helps symptoms, that is, we were just talking about this with endometriosis and symptom management. Like
Okay.
that has its place. Like you have to deal with symptoms. But if that's not, then dealing with the long-term management of whatever situation you're in, that's where I have an issue with.
You're prolonging
Yeah.
it for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been like about an hour.
I
So I'm
know.
thinking we
Oh,
could
right.
probably
Okay. Yeah, sure.
start to,
Holy moly.
I don't know how long listeners they have. I would keep talking all afternoon.
Yeah,
But how are you feeling, Lee? Is there anything you haven't mentioned yet that you really want to get across?
I guess there's one thing, and it kind of comes into the management of pain, and we can just touch on it briefly. And
Yeah.
I think that this is probably where exercise and healthcare professional, like
We haven't really- yeah.
So exercise really, and just movement and activity in general can be really helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, we know that people with chronic low back pain at least have diminished sensory awareness in their back. And what that means is, so you can think about, kind of broadly speaking, two kinds of sensory information coming in. We've got like nociception, and then we've got sort of normal somatosensory information. So if you just were to put your hand on your other hand and just kind of rub your hands together and feel pressure and touch, and the sensation coming from ligaments as they get a bit of a stretch through them, or, a proprioceptive sense. We know that people with chronic low back pain and potentially in other parts of the body, it occurs a bit in the neck as well, as far as we understand, this normal sensory awareness is diminished. All right? And so if we think about someone with chronic pain, let's say they have this pain expectant internal model that's predicting and expecting pain, and they have a very sensitized nociceptive system and a diminished normal sensory information system, that the touch and normal feeling from the back or from the body is diminished, it's potentially really hard for them to update that pain expectant internal model.
That's
right?
Me. Sorry, that's my back.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely. Like, I don't, like, if someone touches, I don't feel it. Like, it's almost numb. That's how I describe it. Like, it feels numb. But it's always sensitized. Like, it always feels, like, aggravated. Okay. But if someone touches it, they're like, this should hurt. I'm like, it doesn't. Like, it's just, it's lost its sensory input.
But then you can get stressed and your back can really hurt. So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, anyways.
So that fits in with a lot of people who experience back pain.
Yeah.
For a long time, right,
Yeah, there's things like the 2-point discrimination test where you'll get two, you'll get like calipers.
Yeah.
Like
two different toothpicks, pretty much.
Yeah,
kind of
toothpicks at a certain distance. And you say, does it feel like 1 or 2? And the closer you are together, it's generally feeling like 1. And then the further you move away, the more likely it is to feel like 2. People with chronic low back pain, they tend to feel it as 1 to a much wider degree, right? And that tells us how sort of efficient their normal somatosensory system is. And so if you think about training for someone who has persistent pain, I think that part of therapy might be to actually improve their normal somatosensory system. So that means having almost like attention-based movement therapy, so you get them to really pay attention to the part of the body that's sore and just do really simple movements. Not pay attention in that, I want you to pay attention because if you don't move properly, you're going to damage yourself, which is a horrible narrative to give someone, and lots of people do get that narrative. Pay attention. I just want you to see what's actually happening there.
Like from can you feel it stretching, or can you feel it contracting, or like what does this movement feel like, and things like that.
Do some cat-cows, not just mindlessly, like do some cat-cows, and how does it actually feel in your back moving your cat-cows? And you'll notice that people with chronic low back pain move in a really kind of rigid and disjointed way, right? And that's because they have really crap sensory awareness generally. And you need good sensory awareness for fluid movement.
Absolutely. And then if you factor in bracing and everything else that is happening when we feel pain, absolutely. It doesn't lend itself to absolutely fluid
bracing
movement.
Strategies, right? And that's going to make it harder for people to move. And then at the same time, a lot of people with chronic pain don't want to explore the pain and see what's happening there. So there's this element of dissociation, right? So it's like you see people with chronic arm pain, for example, and they say that's not my arm anymore, right? So they've almost like psychologically distanced themselves from that part of their body, and that means that they're not trying to pay attention to normal sensory information, and the brain is kind of unbridled then. It's able to make these kind of predictions of threat and pain without the zebra, right? Without the actual prediction error to say you're safe here. So when I say the zebra, remember you're driving down the road and you see the zebra,
that
like,
unexpected outcome.
So you're not getting enough of a clear signal to say that this is not pain.
Or what I'm having is an appropriate response right now because you're not paying attention to it.
We know that somatosensory system is pretty. It's not very clear anyway. Like in people who don't have pain, like if you closed your eyes and paid attention to your body, you're like, that's just a mess of signals.
Well, just like that game where like someone draws a picture on your back and you have to like pin out what they've drawn.
We're like
terrible at that anyway.
Well, I mean, Simon Pratt, he's one of the other PhD students at Notre Dame. He's exploring all of this perceptual stuff in people with chronic low back
That's
pain.
what I was talking about with the honours project as well. Or what
Ah.
I couldn't be a part of anyway.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Was the
Yeah.
mapping of your back and your brain and how that changes when you're in pain and
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, smudging of the somatosensory cortex.
Mhm.
The brain doesn't really know where the boundaries of the back is and so it's, and that happens pretty quickly too.
Yes.
Yep. And so, I think that there's a big sort of, it's been explored, but I think it should be explored further, this idea of somatosensory retraining and
That's
attention
really cool.
retraining.
Yep.
As well as, just taking a general approach to moving more
Yep.
and noticing situations and environments that tend to make your pain worse, so becoming a little bit more mindful of that.
Yeah.
And trying to some degree, engineer your life to minimise those sorts of minimise those sorts of situations and sort of maximise situations where you are feeling better.
I see. Yep. Give yourself more of
Yeah.
the better thing to remind yourself of what that is and
Yeah.
change the pathway
Yep.
and not just always be going down the same
Mm.
road.
Yeah, try
Yeah.
something a little bit different.
Absolutely.
Actually,
Yeah.
I met an osteopath once, and he said that one of the best things that he does for people with chronic pain is to get them to take a different road to work each day.
Amazing.
And it's just like,
Oh, for
Yeah.
real.
and it was just like, this is like a little bit alternative, obviously.
Absolutely.
But he's
Wow.
like, if someone can be comfortable enough to try a different way to work each time, then they'll be comfortable enough to think
More
flexibly
open.
about their pain as
Brilliant.
well.
Yeah.
And he said
Yeah.
anecdotally, I've had a lot of success with this, which we know is not the highest tier of evidence.
Absolutely not.
But, I
But
kinda
that
like
could
that way
lead
of
to other
thinking.
behaviours. Yeah, if you're
Yeah.
open to like there being other ways to get from A to B,
Yep.
then that you would think would follow through to therapy into rethinking about your situation and why you're
Maybe.
feeling pain.
It might change the kind of flexibility of that pain expectancy.
Absolutely. And then if you can go another way
Um,
and still get to work on time and still be safe and not have any zebras run in front of you,
Yeah.
then that could open up the opportunity that, hey, whatever this guy is saying that could be different to what I expect could have some weight to it and mean something.
Yeah,
It's
get
cool.
someone on a
That's
process
really
of
cool.
change. So,
Absolutely. I like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
really cool. I like that
Yeah.
as well.
But yeah,
Realise that.
pretty alternative. I wouldn't be
Absolutely.
trying that
It's
with
not like
everybody
first
going through
point
it.
of call,
Yeah,
no.
it's like, oh, you got a sore back. I'm going to get you to
Which
take
way do you
Grant
go to
Street
work?
instead of...
But once again, if it doesn't do any harm, if they're not getting to work any later, then why not?
Yeah, if
As
they
long
to
as
work later,
then-
that might actually increase their stress and make their pain worse. So-
Absolutely.
But if
Which
they can
could
get
be
there
a-
on time.
Could be an experiment in itself. Like I had to go through things for like my anxiety and stuff, and I had to I know this is differently, but I had to purposely get to class late to prove that I would be,
You would be
okay, if
okay.
that happened.
I don't know
And
if that's
so,
much different, to be honest.
Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
in just like,
Yeah.
what are your expectations and how can we challenge those expectations?
Mm,
And
that's
so in
part
that
of it.
case, like I was just putting myself into the situation that was at the bottom of my list of where I'd ever want to be. But it showed because I was able to be aware
Mm.
and I had to beforehand list out all the things like I thought people would smirk and laugh at me. I thought the lecturer wouldn't look at me. I thought
Right.
I would get kicked out. And then because none of those things happened, I had to be like, all right, maybe it's not that bad to walk in 30 seconds after the class has started,
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, because
That's early.
that's how sensitive I had gotten to this, where like if I
Okay.
could hear them start talking, I
Yeah.
would not go
Freak
in.
out.
Like,
Wow.
like
Okay.
I had this really
Yeah.
overstimulated, oversensitized response. And so
Yeah.
with the appropriate help from appropriate people, you were able to kind of challenge that narrative and that processing of what you thought would happen and
Yeah.
go past it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Very cool.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it has to be done. You can't do that to anyone. Like you can't do that
Obviously, yeah.
without understanding why and what and what
Yes.
to look out for and
Yes.
being really in tune with what you're feeling and
Yeah.
what thoughts you're having.
Yeah, that
Get someone
mindfulness
to
aspect comes
support
into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 But
So that's where outside help can be helpful.
yeah, find yourself a. I think in psychology there's this like phrase where it's like talking about the therapist that you're with. It's like your therapist is the therapy. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't. No.
Right? Okay, so it's not necessarily the treatment modality that you receive, Obviously, people are going to gravitate towards different treatment modalities, but it's really the relationship that you form with the therapist that you have.
And that's what we've talked about before. I'm not necessarily doing anything special with my rehab, but we can talk about it and we can explore it together, and it's a safe place. And
I
all
get that a
kind
lot
of
with
stuff.
my clients. They're like, just talking to you about this has made me feel better. And I'm like, sweet. Like, this is good. I've done a job.
And that's a help-seeking behaviour, right? We are seeking help from someone who's validating our experience and giving us reassurance and rather, and you're really cool.
I think people know a lot more about their situation than they give themselves credit for. And when you just like get them to talk about it, and they're like, I think this is what's going on.
And they can make all these connections for you. You don't even have to do half the work. You're just summarising and parroting back to them what they've said and going, did you hear yourself say this? And we could get going forever. So maybe I'll have you back on again, Lee, if you would talk about it.
Yeah.
And go a little bit more into what to do when you are in pain, because we talked about like doom and gloom, you're in pain, but what can we do about that? And the role of exercise, I'm obviously very passionate about, and I know Abby's got some really cool things nutrition-wise, too, that she's been able to have good success with so far. So that'd be cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming on.
you.
Thanks for listening, everyone.